Hi, welcome to another episode of Montana Shares, your opportunity to find out about the nonprofits that make our state so great. Today we have Erin with Montana Watershed Coordination Council, right?
Got it.
Got it, okay. This is a perfect opportunity, I think, for this show because you guys do some really intricate work that's probably hard to explain in a really short period of time. So let's take it slow and dive in. What is the Watershed Coordination Council and what's your mission? What do you do?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having us on the show today. The Montana Watershed Coordination Council is an umbrella organization for the 63 different watershed groups that are working throughout the state of Montana. So our mission is to unite and support Montana's watershed communities to promote healthy and productive landscapes. Watershed groups are working locally within their basin or sub-basin on community-based conservation, focusing on watershed restoration or community education, and it's our role to support their work on the ground.
Okay, and so give us examples of how you put that mission into action.
So MWCC really focuses on training. We provide multiple training events per year, namely one spring training event that focuses more on technical content, such as this year's training will be on stream monitoring and volunteer monitoring programs. And then we also have training that goes across the board to organizational capacity-based training. So board development, strategic planning, and those types of organizational tools, but specific to watershed work in the conservation context. We also have a symposium that we have every other year where we bring watershed coordinators and agency personnel, anybody working with watershed groups, together in one place to talk about what we call the watershed approach to watershed restoration and conservation. And then we also have different individual capacity-based programs where we do pass-through funding grants to local watershed groups to work on certain capacity initiatives. And we're also a partner with Montana Association of Conservation Districts and Montana Conservation Corps in the Big Sky Watershed Corps program, where we work to bring 20 Big Sky Watershed Corps members to Montana. Some of them are already in Montana, but we give them a place within host watershed groups where they can work for an 11-month term and actually physically be an additional person in the office and support the capacity of those organizations directly. We also just have a bi-monthly newsletter. And then I spend a lot of my time talking with individual watershed coordinators. We maintain a directory of all 63 groups, track their needs and activities, and try to connect the dots, bringing watershed coordinators connected with grant opportunities that may be appropriate or even technical or human resources that they need.
Okay, so just to try to put it into scale, you probably have really small watershed people and relatively large watershed organizations. Can you give us an example of each extreme of that, just so we get a feel for who it is you're working with, who your members are?
Right, yeah, that's a really great example. So watershed groups come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are connected to local government entities like conservation districts, or are lent office space through the U.S. Forest Service. But then it ranges from being physically connected and financially connected to local government to volunteers and 501c, or even organizations that have developed a 501c3 status. Staff in these organizations can vary from all volunteer to one coordinator on contract to an actual salaried person, or some of our bigger watershed groups have multiple staff, maybe a staff of 2 or 3 different, maybe a project manager or communications coordinator. An example of one of our more sophisticated groups would be the Blackfoot Challenge, and an example of a smaller group would be the Rosebud Watershed Group, which is really just a cohort of volunteers without any current coordinating staff.
So would it be a correct assumption that the farther downstream you are, the bigger your organization might be as you get all these tributaries moving toward a bigger thing, or not really a relationship like that?
Not necessarily. There are groups that focus on, that have a wider scope within a particular basin, and that might leverage them for more opportunities to build their organizations. But I think the level of capacity, it's either driven by the mission of the organization. Some of them are focused more on particular issues, like maybe protecting fish habitat would be a priority amongst the other conservation values in the basin. And so an organization that has a very narrow focus may also be smaller. And so then with that, all of our groups, quite frankly, struggle for funding and capacity. So depending on where they focus, if there's more funding available on that particular issue, they might be able to build their organization. If there are endangered species in their basin that they're particularly working on, that would be something that would help them leverage more funding.
Okay, so what makes your work unique and different from everything else?
Well, I think what's unique about MWCC's work is that MWCC was originally created because many of the federal and state agencies that were working with watershed groups on the ground identified a need for coordination. And so MWCC has evolved out of identifying an unmet need and finding a creative way to meet that need. And that's what we continue to do. So many of the conservation work initiatives that are going on across the state in terms of restoration are project-based, and the funding's going to the project, and a lot of our watershed groups are operating off of very small administrative fees attached to those project dollars. MWCC sees the gap in the organizational needs to do all of the additional coordination that's needed to bring the community support and raise awareness about these conservation initiatives. And so we identify that need and we find ways to fill it. And I think that is it's our challenge, but it's also, I think, what makes us really unique.
Okay, and what's one of the things that you're most proud of that you work on?
Well, we're certainly proud of our members, of the stories that they're able to tell us as to why they're involved with Montana Watershed Coordination Council. Just last week we actually had our strategic planning session, and about half of our board is watershed coordinators, and the other half are agency personnel or other larger nonprofits that work with local groups. And there were a few stories from our watershed coordinators of how they started their position at this very small nonprofit. Maybe they had enough funding to work for a month. Maybe they were already in the hole. And their stories all demonstrated that it was really getting linked in with our watershed coordinator network that was the catalyst to them accomplishing great things in their watershed. So every time I hear a story about how we've helped a local group just get to the next level and achieve sustainability, that's what we're really proud of.
I think you really hit on something, because I know here in Montana we're so spread out, and anyone that's doing any sort of good work, they often think that they're the only one doing it, and they feel isolated just because Montana's huge. And I know when Montana Shares goes to Community Shares USA meetings, we have 20 or 30 people from other community shares, and all of a sudden you realize you're part of something bigger, and that you're not alone, and you have people you can call and ask questions of, and kind of having that umbrella over you makes you feel a lot better. I know that. So that's probably one of the roles that you play, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then sometimes it's hard to quantify, that value of bringing people together. But one of the reasons why I love working in Montana communities is because there is such a value in face-to-face connections. And so being able to provide that opportunity for our groups is really exciting.
Great. So tell us a little bit about what's the impact that your organization actually has. What kind of results do you get out of this great work?
Well, so for instance, through our Big Sky Watershed Corps program, I mentioned that we had 20 AmeriCorps service members that were put in watershed groups throughout the state, which resulted in over 35,000 hours of conservation work on the ground. So that's an outcome that we're really excited about. We provided this year training in passive restoration techniques, so beaver mimicry and other affordable ways to do restoration that has a long-term large result. So we're excited to see more of those projects happening on the ground as a result of our training. It's an opportunity to utilize more volunteers and to do more training with less necessarily project funding. And we're excited about that.
Okay. And so what's new this year? What are you up to?
This year we will be hosting our annual meeting on February 12th. And that will be at the Montana Wild Center in Helena. And we'll also be ribbon cutting our 10-mile tile mural. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But what we've done is we've partnered with Lake Helena Watershed and the Lewis and Clark Conservation District to put a mural of the 10-mile watershed in the 10-mile brewery, which is in downtown Helena. And we're really excited to do a ribbon cutting, and we're excited to have a permanent reminder to the Helena community that we're Helena, but we're Helena, which is located in a larger watershed. So we're really excited about that sort of permanent fixture. We've moved our office. We're in downtown Helena now on Fuller and Lawrence. So trying to add some physical presence in the community so we can talk more about our work and what we're doing. We'll have a spring training on water quality monitoring this spring, probably in May, and we're going to actually do a webinar series this year. We're going to try out that platform and see if we can reach even more people, possibly in the eastern part of the state or the higher northwest, that have difficulty traveling to some of our trainings. And then we'll host a symposium in October, October 24th through the 26th in Billings. And that's when we'll be bringing everybody together again to have a lot of fun and get to know each other.
Okay, and tell us a little bit more about the symposium. How many days, or is that one day? What's the details on that?
Our symposium will be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning in Billings. And we're actually assembling, it's kind of an advisory group to help us put together the content of the training. But often our symposium has content that varies from the scientific end of our training spectrum to the organizational side. So we'll be focusing on all different types of content. It'll be an action-packed 3 days.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what can people do, A, to find out, if they want to find out more about your group, where do they go for that? And then secondarily, sort of, what can just sort of the person on the street do to help out water's such a precious resource, and you've got 61 groups that are making that water better for us and for everyone downstream. So what can people do on both finding out more and helping out more? Definitely.
So our website has a lot of information, not only about what we do, but about contacting our watershed groups. And that's www.mtwatersheds.org. On our website, under the resources tab, you can find a map of the entire state of Montana where you can actually click and see what watershed groups are working in your area. So that's, I think, a great opportunity for people to get to know who their local watershed coordinators are and figure out what types of activities are going on in their basin to get linked into. And then, of course, if you're interested in just supporting the work at large or the work of MWCC, there's also donations through our website that we accept and welcome.
Right. So I suspect when there's an active project on the ground, there's a huge need for volunteers. Is that probably a correct statement?
It really varies. I mean, some of the larger, more technical projects, our watershed groups are hiring consultants and doing that. But almost every watershed group also has a lot of activities that are really focused on education and outreach in the community. So where you have more volunteers planting willows or maybe doing stream monitoring. One of the current gaps in a lot of conservation funding initiatives is long-term and post-project stream monitoring or monitoring. And so that's an opportunity for volunteers to get involved, and it's an easy thing to do to monitor a site, and but has a real impact for that group to be able to continue to maintain that project or apply for other projects in the future.
Okay. So to get out and enjoy the water that you're protecting, get out in a canoe or something like that?
Do I get to get out? Yeah, well, our watershed groups are really busy in the summer, so I do find myself getting to go out and visit their projects and their success. That's one of the exciting parts of the job, for sure.
I know that the Missouri River breaks, folks had a job that I almost wanted to give up my job and apply for, was just working on the river, you know, planting cottonwoods and doing other work. And I was like, this would be a perfect way to spend a summer, you know? But
Yeah.
not a good career decision particularly.
Well, that's interesting because we have Big Sky Watershed Corps members that are young people that have probably had a lot of field work and worked outside, and we're unfortunately part of their process of learning that conservation work also means you have to sit at a desk and go to a
Right.
lot of meetings sometimes too. So, but we try to strike a balance.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's see. One trick question. What's your favorite fish here in Montana?
Oh gosh, I guess that would be the rainbow trout that I like to catch most often.
Okay. I'm intrigued by the paddlefish just because of its unique structure, or whatever you'd call it. But okay, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I would just say thank you for this opportunity. It's really great to be able to talk about our groups and what they do, and even explain the coordinating role that our organization performs. So thank you.
You bet. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for doing the work that you do, because I think water is one of our precious resources, and conservation is a key piece to keeping it as healthy as long as possible for ourselves, future generations. I know I've got grandkids that I want them to be out there to go out and enjoy it. So thank you for your work. Thank you guys for tuning in today and finding out more about the groups that make our state so great. Have a wonderful evening.